Watch right now on the Front News Project. Operation Web 2 is blazing. All of Russia and temporarily occupied Crimea have been shaken once again. The enemy is entering the Dnipropetrovsk region, a terrifying reality or a fake from Russian propaganda. And, of course, hell in Lutsk and Pryluky. Putin continues to kill peaceful Ukrainians. Fiery, hot and blazing footage from the front lines watched right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his gang unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom continues. Greetings, this is Front News. Vladimir Timoshenko here with you. In the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war uncovered by our journalists from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then let's begin. And we start right away with exclusive material. Developing our own military forces above all is the key, I'd even say the cornerstone task for Ukraine to win this war. And here is a good illustration that Ukraine is indeed following this path. In addition to dozens of destroyed enemy strategic bombers, the Ukrainian armed forces have recently also damaged the Crimean bridge, airfields, oil depots, and Iskander missile launchers, which the Russians used to kill civilians in Ukraine. And the cherry on top, the Operation Web 2, that's exactly what the shocked aggressors themselves called it. And all the details will be told and shown by TSN Week correspondent Alexander Zahorodny.
Here it is, look, Grandpa, over here. The main thing is not at us.
A preemptive strike before a massive attack by Russian criminals on Ukrainian cities. Friendly drones fly en masse into Russian territory. This is the Bryansk airfield burning. A Mi-8 helicopter was destroyed there and a Mi-35 was damaged. And this is the oil depot in Engels.
Got it. We hit it, look, we hit the depot.
This is no ordinary oil depot. It is from here that fuel is shipped for Russian bombers. Was shipped. At least 3 tanks are burning. And this is no longer Engels, but Kstovo, a city near Nizhny Novgorod, at the Lukoil oil refinery. Drones are calmly making a turn, and locals have time to examine its construction.
In fact, it actually has the engine located right in the back of the vehicle. It has the engine in the back, see? It's circling around. They eat us pretty hard.
The oil depot is burning in several places.
Well, the drone just hit Lukoil, it seems. Wow.
Lukoil is on fire. Lukoil is burning.
The fire is just devouring everything there.
Another fire. Now this is Crimea, the Oktyabrski airfield. After the drone attack, half the sky was covered in thick smoke.
That's it, the Oktyabrski airfield is done for.
And this is the explosion of Iskander-M missile launchers in the Bryansk region. Historic footage. For the first time, Ukrainian forces managed to track and destroy such a high-value target. And finally, this is a Su-35 burning out in the Bryansk region. Just look at how many events have happened, and all of this took place in just 1 week. Even the explosion on the Kerch Bridge. It feels like that happened a very, very long time ago. But in fact, it only happened on Monday. And although the occupying authorities claim that everything is fine with the bridge, just look at the lines in Shonhar right now. The main traffic, the Russians are trying to route not through the Kerch Bridge. And this is already a classic move from the SBU. In this service, they deliberately wait several days for the Russians to react, and then it happens. In their foreign ministry, and not just anyone either. Deputy Minister Sergei Ryabkov denies that Ukrainian drones destroyed 4 dozen strategic bombers and other aircraft. As he wrote, there is nothing even remotely like that. And after this statement, the SBU released this video showing dozens of burning aircraft. Here you can clearly see how the drones take off from the truck and calmly choose their target. And no one even tries to shoot them down. The Russians are trying to hide the scale of the tragedy. They dragged all decommissioned planes to the side of the destroyed aircraft, supposedly to show that everything is still there, and the surviving planes were relocated to the most remote airfields. One Tu-160 was even found in Anadyr. That's 6,600 kilometers from Ukraine. And most importantly, there isn't a single road near this airfield. It's impossible to get there with a truck carrying drones. They've literally driven their planes to the edge of the world. There's a 10-hour time difference. Just think about it. Only a week ago, the Russians were calmly, openly delivering missiles to their airfields, and today they're hiding their planes at the end of the earth. By the way, it's obvious that trucks are becoming the trump card that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, questioned us about so persistently and for so long. Just think about it. It was a truck that delivered explosives to that very Crimean bridge in 2023. And in 2025, trucks brought in hundreds of drones that destroyed part of the enemy's strategic aviation. But what are we supposed to do when we aren't given long-range missiles? So how are we supposed to deliver explosives to enemy depots, oil storage facilities, and airfields? Notice that almost none of the world leaders are eager to comment on the Special Operation Web. They are still shocked by the ingenuity of the Ukrainian special services. This is a new tactic that requires all of them to come up with new ways to counter such special operations. But the Ukrainians keep coming up with new things. On Saturday, dozens of drones flew out from several cars of a military train, destroying almost all the military equipment, 13 tanks and several other armored vehicles. A sort of Web 2. And by the way, it was the occupiers themselves who reported this. I'd just like to clarify with the Russians, is their special military operations still going according to plan? Especially the demilitarization part, because the issue with the Black Sea Fleet is practically resolved. Their strategic aviation is already in Anadyr, and their armored vehicles are burning on railway platforms. But seriously, we clearly understand that the enemy is still powerful. They still have a sufficient number of aircraft and armored vehicles, and even expendable soldiers for meat assaults. But the main thing is, the process has begun. In June 2025, they started to fear us. And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsk direction of the front. The bloody bacchanalia of the enemy army continues here as well. On the Pokrovsk direction, since the beginning of the day, the occupiers have made 21 attempts to push our defenders from their positions in the areas of the settlements of Pryluky, Yelizavetivka, Malinivka, Lutsk, Lisivka, Udachne, Bodonivka, Alexeyevka, Zelenikud, Andriivka, and towards Muravka. The defense forces are holding back the enemy's onslaught and have already repelled 19 attacks. 2 clashes are still ongoing. And now, about a real hell on earth, there is simply no other way to put it. A black day in the Chernihiv region, in the city of Pryluky, 3 generations of one family were laid to rest at once. A mother, a daughter, and a granddaughter. All 3 died when the Russian Shahed drone made a direct hit on their house during the night. The details and consequences of this deadly attack are covered in a chilling report by TSN correspondent Irina Kondratyuk.
This is a quiet, densely populated street, where now among the private houses there is a heavy smell of burning. For the second day in a row, locals have been cleaning up their homes.
My hands are still shaking, and the explosion was so strong right here that our whole house trembled. It was only after that we ran outside.
Ior and his wife Ludmila live across from the house where the Russian Shahed drone struck on the night of June 5th.
It was a terrifying event. There was shouting, noise, people yelling, "Get Grandpa out! Get Grandma out!"
They were shouting, "Get Grandpa out! Get Grandma out!"
They did manage to get her out, Ludmila says, even though the walls and doors had collapsed on top of the woman.
It rumbled loud. I ran out quickly.
It was a roar. I rushed outside. Grandpa was still shouting, "Why are you standing there?" I said, "What do you mean? Why am I standing? Can't you hear that rumbling?" I had just stepped out, just opened the door. Grandpa buried under rubble.
And here he is, 77-year-old Valentin, walking through the charred remains of the family home, trying to spot at least something that survived. But it's really just remnants of belongings.
This used to be the bathroom. Over there was the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom. My daughter lived there with her husband. Now there's no daughter, no granddaughter, and no great-grandson.
27-year-old granddaughter Darina and her 1-year-old son Misha came from Kiev to visit for a few days. The old man stayed behind, so that, where the fire left behind charred construction debris, there used to be 5 rooms. This private house was home to 2 families, but a single strike from a Russian drone took the lives of 3 generations of this family at once. That night in Pryluky, there were several fires breaking out simultaneously in different parts of the city all as a result of the enemy drone attack.
The police have already received more than 80 reports and statements from citizens regarding the damage.
As a result of the massive attack, 2 households were completely destroyed, 15 houses in the private sector were damaged, as well as 15 apartment buildings.
Educational institutions, businesses, and infrastructure facilities were also affected. But most of the state emergency services efforts had to be focused on this particular house.
We managed to arrive in just 3 minutes, but because our unit was significantly damaged by the powerful blast wave, it became extremely difficult for us to get there safely and also to leave the area on time.
The wooden building, faced with brick, went up in flames like a match. And all of this happened right before the eyes of rescuer Alexander. This is his house, his wife, his daughter, and his only grandson.
Kabini knew the process of eating from home. He didn't know he was going home. Everyone was driving. Shahids were falling in the city center. The horror in his eyes, you had to see it to believe it. His daughter served in Kiev City Patrol Police, so patrol officers from Kiev and Pryluky are standing next to him. Everyone is here, police officers, rescuers and many other townspeople. A great number of people have come to this funeral today.
It seems like all of Pryluky is here today near this church. Hundreds of people are gathering from everywhere, bringing fresh flowers and soft toys to pay their last respects to the innocently killed.
On this terrible night in Pryluky, 5 people lost their lives. And this is the greatest tragedy for the city since the beginning of the full-scale invasion.
Now, let's move to the Kharkiv and Kupyansk directions of the front. Let's be honest, this is yet another sacred target for Putin and his entire pack. Accordingly, the situation here is also extremely tense. In the Kharkiv direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled 3 attacks by the aggressor in the areas of Vovchansk, Kamenka and Haibok. In the Kupyansk direction, there have been 4 attacks by the occupiers since the beginning of the day. The defense forces repelled enemy assault actions near Holubivka, Stepova, Novopavlivka and Kolesnikivka. One clash is still ongoing. But as you can imagine, things continue to burn and blaze on the territory of terrorist Russia itself. Most recently in Cheboksary, in the Chuvash Republic of the Russian Federation, drones struck a factory where Russia produces antennas for missiles and drones. Additionally, Russia has built new shelters for aircraft at 13 military airfields. As they say, the armed forces of Ukraine will have plenty of interesting work to do. At the same time, the occupiers have announced an offensive in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Right now, we will assess the situation and explain whether Russia is actually capable of such a large-scale, massive and criminal operation. Let's watch.
Ukraine's defense forces have struck the Zaporizhzhia airfield in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod region. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. As a result of the strike, 2 aircraft were hit. By the way, it is from this very airfield that Russia launches attacks on Ukraine, including with Kinzhal missiles.
At the moment, Ukraine is carrying out a comprehensive series of attacks on airfields hosting the Russian Federation's frontline army aviation with the aim of reducing the activity of Russian Aerospace Forces aircraft during strikes on the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine using KABs and FABs. I should note that previously strikes were carried out on airfields hosting the Russian Aerospace Forces. This includes the Milerovo airfield, where, by the way, there is currently a noticeable surge in the construction of engineering structures, specifically for the protection of Russian Aerospace Forces aircraft. And accordingly, strikes have also been carried out on the Zaporizhzhia airfield, which is a base for MiG-31K aircraft, and the Sharoiko airfield.
The geography of strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation and the territories it has temporarily occupied is quite diverse. In order to protect their aircraft, the Russians have begun actively building shelters at more than a dozen airfields. As a result, protective structures have appeared at 4 air bases in temporarily occupied Crimea, at military airfields in Lutsk, Krimsk, and Primorsko-Akhtarsk, at the Kanskaya Air Base in Adygea, and at airfields in Akhtubinsk, Borisoglavsk, Kursk, and Lipetsk. Recently, earthworks have reportedly begun for the construction of 10 aircraft shelters at the airfield in Engels-Saratov region.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
It's not just the aircraft that are being hit. In Cheboksary, Russia, the VNIR Progress plant in Cheboksary was struck. Local authorities confirmed that the enterprise was hit and it immediately halted operations. According to the Telegram channel Astra, this plant produces a key component of Russia's defense against Ukrainian electronic warfare systems, the Kometa antennas. If military facilities are being hit in Russia, then this same Russia is striking civilian populations in Ukraine. To protect its citizens, Ukraine was supposed to receive 20,000 special missiles to counter Shaheeds, according to agreements with former US President Joe Biden. However, the current administration of Donald Trump decided to redirect them to the Middle East, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reported. On June 6, French Minister of the Armed Forces Sébastien Lecornu did not specify the exact company, but announced that a major French car manufacturer would produce drones on Ukrainian territory. According to media reports, it is Renault Automatic Group. Montenegro wants to strengthen its position in NATO and help Ukraine. The country plans to set up drone production on its territory, with the intention of later providing them to Ukraine as military aid. Washington will help set up UAV production, allocating $15 million for this purpose. The Russians also have successes that look more like a mental disorder. For example, 3 years ago they claimed to have supposedly captured the Donetsk region, and by the 4th year they decided to say they were advancing on Dnipropetrovsk.
There is no objective evidence indicating that Russian occupation forces have reached the administrative borders of the Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. I would note that this is not the first time the Russian side has spread such informational provocations. Literally a month ago, the Russian side already reported that assault units of the occupation army had supposedly reached the administrative borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region.
According to experts, the appearance of this information is yet another information and psychological operation by the Russian side since the start of the negotiation process in Istanbul. The Russians are doing this to twist the Ukrainians' arms during the process of reaching a peace agreement.
And now it's time to analyze the current situation on the Novopavlivka section of the front. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill, and maim. Today, on the Novopavlivka direction, the enemy attacked 8 times near the settlements of Novozelka, Zelenopol, Volnopol, Vezele, and in the direction of Shevchenko and Zaporizhzhia. One battle is still ongoing. The settlements of Zaporizhzhia and Novopil were hit by airstrikes with guided bombs. These have also been very difficult days for Western Ukraine. Ternopil and Lutsk experienced the most massive attack since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. In Lutsk, the Russians attacked with 6 missiles and 15 drones. A high-rise building was hit, 27 people were injured, 1 person was killed, and another young woman is missing. TSN correspondent Tatiana Komich visited the scene of the bloody events. We present to your attention her report filled with pain.
Because of the night attack, this apartment building suffered the most. One of the entrances completely collapsed from the first to the top floor. The roof was also partially destroyed. Rescue operations have been ongoing here since early morning. Near the destroyed building are the relatives of a young couple who rented an apartment on the 8th floor. Nikolai is 26 and his girlfriend Vanya is 24 years old. The young couple was supposed to get married very soon. The apartment where they lived was completely destroyed. Their relatives held out hope for good news until the very end, but at noon, rescuers found the man's body.
His girlfriend's phone is ringing, but he isn't answering.
Completely destroyed, nothing left from the 5th floor down to the 1st. Right before the explosion, I drove my car just a couple of meters away, and then there was a flash behind me. 5 civilians were evacuated from this building, you could say, in total, saved.
There could have been more victims, but many people, after hearing the alarm, went down to the shelters. In total, about 30 people were injured as a result of the enemy attack. They say everything happened very quickly. They heard a rumble, and almost immediately there was an explosion. The injured suffered bruises, fractures, and lacerations. For the most part, these are minor or moderate injuries. People are trying to recover from the shock, sharing stories about what they went through and footage they took at night during the rescue.
There were injuries, there was bleeding, there were abrasions. People have calmed down a bit now. They have been given hot tea and water. The building is made of panels, which makes clearing the debris much more difficult. If it were made of brick, it would be easier.
In addition to this apartment building, the blast wave damaged dozens of private homes, commercial buildings, vehicles, and educational institutions. Doors and windows were blown out there.
I was lying under the window. When it exploded, something from the ceiling hit me on the head. I started feeling around, checking if there was any blood. It seemed like there wasn't, and it was dark too.
I didn't hear anything. Just an explosion, that's all. We had taken cover. If we hadn't, we'd have been right here. The shrapnel even flew all the way over there.
Athletes from the Ukrainian national track and field team who had come for a competition were caught in the shelling. They were staying at a hotel near where the strike occurred. No one was injured because they managed to run away from the windows in time.
We sat down in the corridor.
We sat in the corridor and stayed there until 4:30 in the morning. Then there was a big explosion. We immediately ran downstairs, and by then everyone there was already a bit injured. Some people were bleeding, others had bandages.
Some had blood, some had bandages. There were people there who had been wounded. one person was losing blood, and I immediately started looking for a tourniquet or some kind of band to help him. And the irony is that just yesterday, Victor and I took an exam on this very topic on medical aid.
Near medical aid bedding was destroyed nearby. A relief station was set up near the destroyed house. Here, residents are provided with water, food, and also tea. The local authorities also offered temporary housing to people, but most decided to spend the night with relatives.
Now, let's analyze in detail the situation on the Guliai-Pol and Orekov directions of the front. The enemy is active here as well. On the Guliai-Pol direction, since the beginning of the day, one engagement with the enemy near the settlement of Malinovka has been repelled. Two more engagements are still ongoing. The settlements of Guliai-Pol and Olgovskoye were hit by an airstrike with unguided rockets. In the Orekov direction, our defenders repelled 3 enemy assaults in the areas of Novoandrievka, Stepnoye, Nesteryanka, and towards Pavlovka. One engagement is still ongoing. At the same time, the enemy carried out airstrikes on Novoandrievka and Kamenskoye. And also, on the night of June 6, Russia launched a massive drone and missile attack across all of Ukraine. But once again, in the Russian Federation itself, local residents can only dream about it. Several loud explosions were heard in the Saratov, Tambov, and Ryazan regions. In the hope of saving at least something, the Russian authorities decided to hide one of their assets. We'll tell you exactly where in just a minute. At the same time, there's another very interesting fact. The daughter of Keith Kellogg, the US Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, responded to the attack on Kyiv and questioned whether Putin is truly ready for peace. Symbolic, isn't it? We'll go into more detail on all these topics in the next analytical segment.
Russia has once again carried out one of the largest attacks on Ukraine. Simply put, on the night of June 6, Russia launched 407 drones and 44 missiles at Ukraine. Kyiv, Chernihiv, Lutsk, Ternopil, Khmelnytsky region and other areas came under massive attack. There are injured and dead. But at the same time, Russia was getting what it deserved in return. Many regions were unsettled by raids from Ukrainian drones. Some of them caused quite a stir in Ingol-Saratov region. A fire broke out at an oil depot that supplies fuel to the Engels 2 military airfield where bombers are stationed. Explosion, fire, smoke, all of it was spectacular without a doubt. I know, this fuel is very specific for airplanes. You can't just go buy it at a gas station, bring it in a tanker truck and refuel a plane. It's quite unique. With some additives, mixtures, and again, just like that. It's not sold at gas stations. For a certain period of time, we deprived the Russian Federation of specific fuel reserves. Don't forget that there are strategic reserves in other locations, but that's not all. Drones also reached the Tambov region. The strike hit the Progress plant, which produces high-tech equipment for aviation and missile control systems. They may be the same as in the administrative premises. Or it could strike a finished goods warehouse. The fact that it didn't detonate doesn't mean anything. For example, some computer, there's no need for it to explode. It burned down, that's it, all the files were there, all the slides, all the presentations, all the technical documentation, everything. You could say the plant is paralyzed, but again, we need to wait for some kind of verified confirmation, and it's quite possible that it will come. Not right away, maybe in a week, a month, maybe 2, maybe more than a month will pass. And finally, Ryazan. There, a fire broke out at the airfield where Russian strategic aviation was almost certainly stationed.
By the way, speaking of Russian planes, after the successful web operation, the Russian authorities apparently couldn't think of anything better than to hide the Tu-160 at an airfield all the way in Chukotka. Well, that's quite a predicament. For Ukrainian drones, the issue isn't even the distance, it's just that a truck loaded with drones simply can't get there. After all, there's no road to the airfield, unfortunately.
They were frantically in emergency mode searching for some remote airports to relocate to, abandoned airfields to land at. But before landing there, the local counterintelligence and police combed through the nearby forests, the closest gas stations and clearings, looking for any outsiders or any suspicious cargo or containers.
Although perhaps the Russian authorities were also frightened by the effective work of Ukrainian drones in the Bryansk region. After all, according to Russian media reports, the Bryansk airport was attacked and Mi-8 and Mi-35 helicopters were destroyed.
Yes. Ooh!
Nevertheless, despite Trump's hopes that Putin will come to his senses, Deputy Head of the Presidential Administration Pavel Pally stated that Russia plans to occupy the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in the fall, and then to create a buffer zone along the northern border by 2026.
We don't know under what circumstances he was asked, what exactly he was asked, or why that particular rhetoric was used. Perhaps he was asked what the Russian Federation envisions, and maybe he voiced his own perspective on future plans. But as for me, given the current state of the Russian Federation, I don't think they have the resources to accomplish everything he mentioned by the end of 2025 or, I don't know, by the end of 2026.
Kellogg's daughter also responded to the overnight attack on Ukraine, writing on social media that it was a loud night in Kyiv and that, in her view, Russia does not want peace.
That's all for today. But very soon, Front News will bring you new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.